act like you're going to succeed, right? Funding is not the milestone. And so if you don't focus on team from day one and people from day one and culture from day one, then no matter how much you get funded, none of it's going to matter.
Welcome everyone to UpTech Report. This is our Founders Journey, Lessons Learned, Leaders Insight. I'm excited to be joined by Brian Rainey. This is part 2 of our discussion. Definitely check out part 1 where we heard more about their company Gooten and their custom print fulfillment service platform. Now, Brian, last time you were talking when I asked you 5 years ago, what would you wish you had known? You're like, that was a loaded question. Yeah. But it's like, it's this, what you learn over the years that really leads you where you are today. I'd love to hear your overall story, both the last 5 years, but even before. How did you get to where you are today?
Right. It has been a circuitous path that only when looking backwards, we can drive the linear line. I was a numbers guy, accounting and finance undergrad. I was a CPA. I guess technically I am a CPA. You can't get rid of that stigma, even if you leave the industry, it turns out, for 4 years with Deloitte. And I actually was auditing venture-backed companies. So I think startups was always where I was headed. And that's exactly right. And I still joined one, which is that's where people ask me if I really know what's going on. And then after business school, I was an investment banker. So again, that kind of accounting and finance background with a focus on how can I bring best in class, we don't reinvent finance, right? I mean, you're not reinventing the T
numbers
account.
Are numbers.
That's been pretty consistent for a while. And so my plan was always to go and get a, sort of the corporate background and then apply that into a startup. I was the CFO of a fintech company in Austin, Texas. Was there for about 2 years, wanted to come back to the East Coast.
Buzz Points?
That was Buzz Points. That's exactly right. So that was a local rewards company based out of Austin, Texas. That was a trial by fire, no doubt. Worked with some incredible people with some great technology, but ultimately, I'm born and raised Washington, D.C. I wanted to get back to New York, and joined up here with Gooten and really took, the entire professional learnings and that time, and saw within Gooten what I had been looking for. Fintech, by definition, is zero sum, right? Finance transaction creates ultimately a buyer and a seller. It's sort of zero there. And that idea of, for me to give something to one person, I have to take it from someone else, is what I love. With Gooten, technology specialization created best-in-class partnerships around manufacturers who could focus on getting the right product out at the best sort of price and the best quality, being enabled with our technology solution while providing merchants a single point of integration. I really like that idea that specialization created something better. And when I took
a win-win-win.
A win-win-win. That's exactly right. And I really like that idea where, we have internally at Gooten, if you make the best choice on behalf of the end customer over thousands of transactions, that's going to work out for everybody. I really like that. It's one of our key tenets here is we enable everyone at our company in every individual situation that they're faced to make the best decision on behalf of the end customer, because we're building lifetime customer relationships here. We don't look at order volume as a transaction. That's an interaction with a customer of our merchant partners.
It's interesting that you've going into the role of CEO, being all in the numbers and CFO before. Honestly, as a CPA, you're not the stigma. You seem too much energetic.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
dynamic.
I appreciate that. No, I actually worked with some amazing people, but yes, I felt that as well, that the accounting background was going to be really what I was going to take into the professional world rather than staying as an accountant. And I say that having learned more than almost anything. My manager at Deloitte still is the best manager I've ever had. I still keep in touch with her. She's the most dynamic person I've ever worked with. I wanted to broaden it out just a little bit from just accounting.
A little bit. Now, whether it was at Gooten or before, have you been involved as far as fundraising, raising new funds and rounds?
Yep. Yeah, we raised right after I got the Buzz Points. We raised a fairly large round, and we've raised a round since I've been at Gooten as well.
Any common mistakes that you have seen made when it comes to seeking funding?
Yeah, I think I think knowing your story or really being confident in what you're going out and building. Why are you getting this capital? I think that's been the thing that frankly I've learned, right? You need the money. That's clear, right? That's again, my CPA background can get me on that piece. Right. But how do you put yourself in the shoes of the person who's giving you money? Why are you doing this? What is the opportunity cost for that funding and what can you do with that? And in a lot of ways, how can you best boil the story down to say, with this capital, I can return X because of this? How do you increase the speed of that flywheel? How do you really narrow down? Every company is doing a million things every day to try to find that product market fit, really understand their customer, expand, growth, all of that. How do you boil that down for an investor who sees, legitimately 100 pitches a year? How do you really sort of make them understand this capital and the opportunity cost of what I'm going down to boils down to this most important thing? I think that's the most important thing. And I say that hopefully with some humility, because that's what I've had to get a lot better at. I am excited about all of the things that we're doing, but in a 30-minute conversation, how do you boil it down to that one thing that's going to provide the greatest amount of value going forward?
Funding is one piece, but then building the right team to be able to go beyond that and actually create as you call a world-class technology and a solution. When it comes to building that team and hiring the right people, have you seen any common mistakes when it comes to hiring?
How much time do we have in the second part of this interview? Because that's, it's funny that you say that funding is one thing, his team is another. I disagree. I think team is the only thing. If you don't get team right, then you shouldn't fund because it doesn't matter, right? I advise a few startup companies, shout out Revel Transit in New York, and was literally with them at founding and was talking through with them, hey, get your paperwork in. Let's make sure we get this right. And they're saying, look, we're trying to do this and we're trying to do this. And I said, guys, if you succeed and you don't do this right at the very beginning, this is going to come back and bite you. And if you fail, none of it matters anyway. So act like you're going to succeed, right? Funding is not the milestone. And so if you don't focus on team from day one and people from day one and culture from day one, then no matter how much you get funded, none of it's going to matter. And so that's what I sort of mean of like, funding is a hurdle you need to overcome. Team is something you must overcome, right? That is, you have to do that right. So I think the biggest areas beyond just really understanding and recognizing who the next incremental resource, how they can give the greatest amount of leverage to your team and to your company is, and obviously creating a culture that people want to work in. Alignment around between the hiring manager, the hire themselves, and frankly, the rest of the organization, I've seen is the greatest area of improvement that we've implemented over the past 5 years, so that there's a very clear set of understanding beyond just title, right? Especially early in a startup, people have a million hats, right? And so when you come in and say, hey, we hired this director of product management, well, there's a bunch of different roles that a very effective product manager can play depending on the stage of the company, depending on who else you have, depending on where it is. We have 30, 60, 90 day, sort of first 30 days, second 30 day, third 30-day reports, which say, look, this is how we're going to define success for the first 90 days of a new hire's journey at the company. The new hire sees exactly what's expected of them. The hiring manager is clear on what they're expecting. Ultimately, I get to look at this and say, okay, I see the resources we're putting towards this and salary and equity and all the ways we compensate our team. As I'm looking at this 30, 60, 90, does that match the resources that we're putting on? And that heads off things that for new hires have no control over, which is alignment within the company and saying, hey, I actually think we need something a little bit different here. So that's finding that right fit from a teammate as well. We've seen a huge amount of success. And then finally, we value personal and professional growth as a stool of value of working at this company. We invest a large amount of money in training and cross-training. We have, I think now 9 teammates that started in our customer support department that are now account managers and head of operations and data specialists, because from customer support, every problem of this company. And by investing in them from a professional standpoint, by requiring our management to constantly have up leveling as part of expectation setting for our team, we not only invest back in our people, but we get more out of them as well. Our average tenure for half of our team, having doubled the size of our team this year, for the other half of our team, the average tenure of this company is over 3.5 years. And that is really rare in a startup. And to have that kind of institutional knowledge is really, really helpful and important when, the things that pop up, inevitably pop up.
I imagine managing a team and the growth and the culture itself changes as you gain more and more. How big is the team today?
We are so what we're taping this on a Thursday. So as of Monday, we will be 100 people. On April 1st, we were 50 people. Yeah. So that is
A massive amount of growth. How do you handle that?
We closed our office April 1st. So that's the other interesting piece. Investing in it. Look, there are very few things now that we are going to be a team of 100 people that I do as the CEO of this company. One of them absolutely is culture. It is a non-negotiable of this company. You can be the absolute best developer. You can be the smartest product lead. You can be killing it on operations. But if you can't work across our team, that's a non-negotiable, that period, right? Culture is what you allow. And so maintaining those standards of culture and really getting behind those myself is that thing that absolutely still sits with me, no question, and that I filter out through. And I think it's also, how do we onboard our team? As we have onboarding sessions now seemingly every other week for our new teammates, making sure they understand that culture is theirs now. You're not part of this team. You're not, so how does that culture morph? How do you add something? We just opened an office in Colombia to supplement, teammates in Serbia and the Ukraine and Canada. Well, how do we start bringing in Colombian culture into what is now a broad global organization? We're very familiar with Serbian traditions because they've been part of our team for 3 years. How can we bring in Colombian traditions, and how can we celebrate that? So it is something that morphs. It's something that is involved, but I think more than anything, it has to be front of mind. It's not something that happens accidentally. It's something that we're very, very proactive about.
You said team is the first and only priority to start with, and then from there you can grow. Now that you've got that base, and you guys are definitely growing, on the marketing side, to be able to scale and truly grow,
Yep.
Any common mistakes that you've seen people make in marketing in today's environment?
Yeah, I think it goes back to something I said earlier, being all things to all people. You had read at the beginning of the interview what Gooten is not for, right? I think that's incredibly important, and that's important for the merchant as well. We don't want to put ourselves out there as a one-size-fits-all solution, because what ends up happening is we spend an enormous amount of time on merchant partners who are absolutely looking for the right solution. And as we look back on our marketing message, I can see why they would have thought that we would have provided that, where they would be better served by another on-demand manufacturing partner. They would be better served by a smaller entity. They would be better served in a more niche market. That's incredibly important. So our marketing message actually continues to get refined so that we're having conversations with those partners that we believe our solution is tailored for and fit for. I think that's incredibly important. But I also think that making sure that we are top of mind, middle of mind, and end of mind when you think about what is now a nonlinear buying process. The buying process is no longer a straight, sort of search and then narrow down and then choose. It can happen in a much different kind of way. And so we're trying to avoid, and we're really trying to get better at avoiding that trap of SEM marketing. Yes, I can absolutely point to a last touch attribution that says this person came in from this channel and I paid this much money and then I made this much, and so I should throw all my money at that channel. That's just not how it works, right? Attribution is attribution and alchemy. I think attribution marketing and saying how much goes towards this channel versus this channel is the 21st century version of alchemy from the 15th century. It's turning lead into gold, I think, it's sometimes. But it is incredibly important in thinking about your brand holistically, in the same way, frankly, that the Gooten supply chain solution allows our brands and retailers to think about their solution holistically. You're not just a content house, you're a commerce engine. You're connecting with your customers in different channels. Commerce is one of those channels. We need to be there also. So marketing is not just SEM, it's white papers, it's messaging, it's support, it's being out there in those conversations.
This environment we're in, as of recording this, being in 2020, COVID, everyone's had to shift. Some maybe they were doing a lot of in-person events and trade shows and conferences. They're doing things, and now everything's online and digital, and there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of distraction. How do you both manage what is working and working well? What are you planning on like doubling down on, and how do you see marketing going into the next year?
Yeah, I think the big one is that we take a data-driven approach to absolutely everything, right? We look at data as when it comes to every one of the 10,000 orders that goes through our platform every day. We want all the data on that. So why wouldn't we have data on where we're spending our resources and spending our money? At the same time, we actually have a pool of capital that is explicitly carved out to say, test capital. That's the stuff where, number one, tell me before we spend this money, tell me before we spend this time, tell me before we go into this area, what does success look like? You see too often ready, fire, aim, where you shoot at a marker and you put the bullseye exactly where you hit, and you say, look at what we did. We did exactly what we were looking to do. And so that sort of alchemy of attribution of what supports what is incredibly important. And I think carving out some money to say we're going to run a bunch of tests, we still don't know kind of where things are and how that works. I think that's incredibly important for us. But it is that idea of basically incentivizing our team. Our marketing team is no different than any of our marketing team. They want as much resources as possible to be in many places they possibly can. That's the fun challenge. That's why we have a great marketing team. And what we do is we just say, bring us back the data. Marketing and sales, especially direct sales, are the easiest things to invest in because they're the ones with the fastest and most direct, theoretically, payback, right? So unlike another engineer, what does that incrementally get me, or another product manager, or another partner in our finance team, these teammates and these resources can pay for themselves. And so creating that sort of sense that says, if you can justify this spend, how could I can give you more of it. That's a really strong driver of performance and behavior for our marketing folks.
Going forward into the new year yourself, what challenge do you see you're going to need to overcome for continued growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just speed and resources and allocation and focus. That never goes away, right? We talk to our team all the time. We've grown unbelievably. We have literally 100 more physical hands than we did, 6 months ago. And so the challenges it's not going to change. Good problems still part of a good problem, right? I mean, that's great. That's one of the most fun parts of growth. But I think it is, as we grow, the cost of mistakes, the cost of delay, the cost of a lack of focus becomes bigger, just because you're dealing with bigger numbers, right? When we talk to our team about our goals for next year, if something launches on a Monday versus launching on a Friday, we got 50 weeks in a year. That's 2% of the year. 2% times our goals for next year is a big number. And so really kind of getting that speed and that focus, I think, is our biggest challenge, while recognizing transparency and communication for what is already a globally distributed team becomes that much more important, that we have to allow our teammates to make decisions within the right framework, with the context and understanding of what they've got, without having the ability to hop into a conference room, right? We have teammates that are literally 12 hours apart. Kharkiv in the Ukraine and Seattle, Washington are 12 time zones apart. And that's where our 2 engineering leads are. So, figuring out how to make sure that works actually creates something even better. Our operations team, which is half in Europe and half in the Americas, they can get things right by having an 8-hour day and an 8-hour day turn into 16 productive hours for us as we check work in and check work out. So all of the challenges are advantages. It just takes a lot of work to make sure that we're getting helped by them and not hurt by them.
What a challenge with the team, and I appreciate the analogy that you shared there. By the way, I interviewed another company called Loop that are trying to focus on when your team is distributed, especially internationally, to help, how do you keep that focus and people going through. They just went into open beta. So take a look at that.
I will.
Last 2 questions for you. What books, audiobooks, podcasts are you reading and listening to right now, or rather have read and would recommend?
Yeah, there's one, and I cite it so often that it's funny that I don't have it, but it's Matt Willowig is the CEO of Automatic. They do WordPress.com. They bought Tumblr. I found that on a podcast, like honestly, a week after we shut our office down, and he talked about the difference between a remote team and a distributed team, and how 1,700 people at Automatic work together without an office, and how they've built this up, and what the sort of 4 levels of work are. That is incredibly helpful because it's so practical. It's facing those challenges of what level 1 is to level 2, level 2 to level 3. That's incredibly helpful. For me, it's been a book, Automatic Habits. I've actually read and now reread. It's how literally habit formation and habit creation are so important to what you take every single day to be effective, right? How do you change environment? How do you change the reward structure to be able to drive that home? And then finally, because I am terrible at time management, but I benefit from it just like everybody. Getting Things Done was a book that I just sort of kept literally in different places, kept coming across. I think that where I finally decided to read it the first time, having now gotten through it like 7 times, because J.J. Abrams was asked, how did you film 2 major blockbusters and this like 15-minute short with your friends? And he said, I read this Getting Things Done thing, and it's all just tasks, right? Shooting a scene for one movie versus shooting a scene for another movie versus changing a light bulb, or just things I have to do. And so I am never, ever going to be as good as I could be. I think that's the challenge. It's also why I keep rereading the books and re-underlining the same passages that stand out for me. But no, that's been one of the 2020 focuses, is with all of this extra time, I'd like to come out of the other side on my own personal and professional growth track of getting better with time management and really setting it up so that it's almost second nature, right? When you walk in and sit down, I have a list of my 5 most important things to do today, so that no matter how crazy the day gets, at the end of the day, I can look back and I said, yesterday, those were my 5 most important things. I got those 5 things done. This was a good day, even despite the craziness that came out today. It also really helps keep on track, because as the business grows, my focus has to extend. I have to be thinking farther in the future. That doesn't change the fact that immediately after this call, I'm going to get on and solve a problem for one of our customers. That has to happen. But if you're not doing that, you're going to start focusing much more sort of narrowly instead of extending that out and constantly raising the bar for the team. That's been my 2020 kind of focus, and just like I don't see myself stopping rereading these books, I think it'll continue to be my focus going forward.
Last question for you, Brian. What kind of tech innovations do you predict we'll see in the near term, next year or so, and long term, 5-10 years from now?
I mean, I don't think I'm going to go too far off the beaten path here. I think whenever Apple decides that augmented reality is something that we should have, I think you're going to see that come out in ways that were really kind of unthought of. I'm a big fan of mobility, just a personal thing that I like in smart cities. I think what the pandemic is allowing cities to frankly get away with and try. In New York City, there's outdoor dining, and it happened almost overnight, where to get bike lanes in took 2.5 years, right? I think you're going to start really seeing this kind of transformation, which is going to be a handshake between technology and mobility solutions, and changes in logistics needs, and frankly, just changes in the needs of the demographics and where they are. The accelerating shift towards work from home means we're going to start looking at underutilized resources and start saying, how can we better put these to work, right? How can you have a more livable city? What does that look like? How does 5G start really fundamentally changing even that idea of what can be done remote, right? The surgery one is the most mind-blowing to me, right? That you can have a surgeon operating remotely on a person. I'm not going to be the first person to be there. I'm going to be on the late adopter stage of that cycle. But I really do think that's what's gonna, I think, honestly, make the biggest difference and fundamental and foundational difference in people's lives. Not saying that technology hasn't, but I think when you really take a snapshot, of February 2020 and look at February 2021, February 2022, February 2023, it's not going to look wildly different, except that the things that you did in February 2020 and took it for granted, right? Even when the technology existed, it really has felt like the past 6 months has really just sped up the adoption curve on a lot of these technologies, which ultimately still creates that flywheel effect of more investment, more focus means more applications, and you start kind of just making smarter decisions around our use of land, our use of space, and and how we get around.
Brian, I love the clarity that you give both on the future and the insights over the years. Thank you so much for your time, man. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate it.
Definitely check out part 1 of our interview, guys, to hear more about their platform, Gooten. And this was our lessons learned and leaders insight. Our sponsor for today's episode is TerraLeap. If your company wants to learn how to better leverage the power of video to increase sales and marketing results, head over to terraleap.io and learn about the new product, Customer Stories. Thanks again, and we'll see you guys next time.
Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.